Howdy, howdy. In the ever-evolving world of college football, big changes are continuing to happen daily. The most recent team to stir the pot, though, is the 2024 famous Idaho Potato Bowl champions, the Northern Illinois Huskies. As we jump into the new year, the Huskies are jumping into a new conference. For the last few months, there has been speculation that NIU would make the move to the Mountain West Conference. On Friday afternoon, the speculation has almost been put to bed. Northern Illinois University formally accepted an offer to join the Mountain West Conference as a football-only school, effective on July 1st, 2026. However, there's one roadblock still in the way. Northern Illinois' Board of Trustees will meet on Tuesday to discuss and vote on paying the $2 million membership fee to join the Mountain West Conference. The university strongly recommends that the board approves the membership fee. If and when approved, they would remain a football member of the Mid-American Conference through the 2025 season, but the Huskies will need to find new conference landing spots for the rest of their sports teams. The Huskies are now the newest college football team to stir things up.